Celebrity historian Raffi Andonian runs down the facts on an 18th century influencer.
Welcome back on in to Studio STL. So I'm sure that you guys have heard about, the influencers on social media, all that jazz. Well, we are going to be talking about an 18th century influencer ahead of his game. To do that, we got celebrity historian Raffi Andonian. Welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. And here he is, actually, on the front of this 2026 Farmer's Almanac. So here he is still influencing today.
Here we go.
On one of the things he's most known for.
Yes. So on this day, back in 1732, Benjamin Franklin published Poor Richard's Almanac. So I do want to tell the folks what an almanac is. So I looked it up on Google. It's an annual publication filled with reference info like calendars, astronomical data, weather forecasts, facts, or statistics.
That's
so
right.
Is all of that in Benjamin Franklin's almanac? Okay.
Yes, so think of the almanac as the 18th century internet. So it's kind of funny that you looked it up on the internet because it has information like weather for the year so that farmers can plan accordingly, including the frosts that they're expecting, the first and last frost. How about court dates for the year so lawyers can plan, when they're going to bring cases? How about the high tide and low tide, or the moons and the planets, when they're going to be where for sailors to be able to navigate? So it better be accurate so you can actually rely on this stuff. They're not making stuff up. They're using celestial observations. They're using mathematics. They're using astronomy. They're using an old form of astrology through the Catholic Church. So there's these different kinds of things that they're incorporating into it to be able to provide this valuable information on the 18th century internet. The kinds of things that you look up today on the internet. Yeah.
And we were saying, I was like, if Benjamin Franklin had a TikTok today, he would be viral.
Yes, he would. And you know part of the reason why is because he was a funny guy. So Ben Franklin had a very popular almanac known as Poor Richard's Almanac. And now the content of almanacs was standardized, kind of like if I went to different news stations, I'm going to find some of the usual stuff I expect, weather, traffic, the local mayor, etc., right? But each one has a different flavor. And Ben Franklin knew how to add some flavor to his. A couple of things he was known for, and he himself said, I'm taking age-old wisdom and putting it into this. So he's not necessarily inventing stuff, but what he's doing is he's kind of recrafting it in a way that's concise, clear, which really matters. We know that in the news industry. And in his case, particularly funny. He was humorous. That's where the TikTok part would be really good. And so, he was known for adding that twist, if you will, to make things funny. It was a big hit. His almanac sold 10,000 copies a year. Let me give you a context of what that means. Today, adjusted for population, would mean 5 million copies every year. I'm not talking about cumulatively. 5 million copies every year is what it would take today to equate how successful his almanac was. There were many almanacs in colonial America. He was not the only one. Competitive industry. But because of his certain flavor and brand, that's what he was able to do. And he has a funny story in there, too, I'll add, too, that's really funny.
Tell me.
So, you know how fake news is a thing? Oh, he was loving the fake news. So what he did, for example, he had a competitor, speaking of competition, and in his almanac, he predicted the death of his competitor. The competing almanac guy, he's like, wait a minute, who's this guy, Poor Richard, that's saying all this? Poor Richard, because he's doing it as a synonym. Richard Saunders. Ben Franklin is under a pseudonym, which was common in the 18th century. And so what happens is the guy disputes that he's dying. The date passes, the guy isn't dead, and so when he starts to publish that he's not dead, Ben Franklin says, oh, that's just imposters that are pretending to be him. Years later, the guy actually dies, several years later, and after he actually dies, Ben Franklin still publishes and says he's grateful that the imposters finally let go of their game. So he went with the running joke for a long time. So fake news was a thing back then, too. And he wasn't the only one. Jonathan Swift, famous for Gulliver's Travels, he did something similar over in Europe himself. He was a contemporary of Ben Franklin, just about a generation older. So this was kind of a thing that happened even back then. Just like the internet had fake news, almanacs can do that too, with some kind of fun, competitive humor going back and forth.
I know TMZ would have been all over that. All over that one. This is so cool.
Yeah, it is.
Just how they have their different forms of news, social media, and how it's still relevant today.
And things were so, it was so much a place of wisdom and smarts. I'll give you a good example that's not Ben Franklin, but his contemporaries was a guy by the name, also Benjamin, but Benjamin Banneker was his name. Now, Ben Banneker was one of the earliest black mathematicians and inventors in early America. He put out an almanac every year, too. And he took his almanac as evidence that black folks are not inferior to whites in their intellect. He writes a letter to Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson, who was Secretary of State at the time that he was going to do this in the early 1790s, encloses his almanac with it, sends it over to Jefferson and says, look, this is proof that we can do the same science and math that the other guys can do. Jefferson writes him back, actually, and says, you know what? That's actually pretty good material there, and this is an example of what your race might be able to accomplish. This is what Jefferson writes. And so Banneker was so happy about that, or proud about that, that in the subsequent almanac, it's like the saga, he publishes both his letter to Jefferson and Jefferson's response in the next almanac to show that, exactly, showing the receipts, exactly, which, you know, if you've ever been on social media, you see some screenshots of some text or something like that. Except he didn't actually, like, cross out the phone number. He left Jefferson's name in there, all right? And so this was kind of an early civil rights publication, too, for Ben Banneker. Very famous moment at that time. How cool is that?
It is cool.
Almanacs had a lot of intelligence.
About this, you light up. With all the history, you just have so much information. You guys, Raffi Andonian, celebrity historian, follow along with him. You have a YouTube, right?
Thank you. I do. Celebrity_historian.
There we go. There's the information. Give him a like and follow on Instagram as well. He's got so much stuff, you guys. And this was so cool. Well, shout out to Ben Franklin.
That's right.
Our 18th century influencer.
And you can pick up a copy of the latest 2026 copy as well.
There we go.
Engage with history, the old school internet.
That's right. Keep it here. We'll be right back. Oh, this is so cool.